Welcome to this session on making community connections to meet the transportation needs of people with disabilities in rural America. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Billy Altom, who is the Executive Director of the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, fondly known as APRIL. APRIL is a national membership organization, and Billy's going to tell you a little bit more about APRIL and its mission, but what you need to know is that they are dedicated to advancing the rights and responsibilities of people with disabilities in rural America. And they do provide a great deal of leadership and resources on rural independent living through their national network. Billy stays very busy. In addition to being the executive director of APRIL, he is also involved in transportation advocacy by serving in a number of roles. He was appointed by the previous Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Fox, to the Advisory Committee on Transportation Equity, and by the Governor of Arkansas, Governor Hutchinson, to the Arkansas Public Transportation Coordinating Council. He also has served as chair of the Rail Vehicles Access Advisory Committee of the United States Access Board. And finally, in 2016, Billy was appointed by President Obama to serve on the National Council of Disabilities. So with that, Billy, I'm very happy to turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Virginia. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here and talk about transportation. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. As a young man from rural Arkansas, getting from point A to point B has always been somewhat of an issue, whether you have a disability or not. So let's jump into what I wanted to talk to you about today. I've got a quick presentation for you on making community connections to meet the transportation needs of people with disabilities in rural America. Again, I'm Billy Altom. I have the pleasure of being the Executive Director of APRIL. APRIL, as was mentioned a few moments earlier, is a national membership organization dedicated to advancing the rights and responsibilities of people with disabilities in rural America, because with rights come responsibility. So we want to help people fulfill their utmost and be the most productive citizens that we can be. Our membership consists of Centers for Independent Living, and those of you who are not familiar with Centers for Independent Living, these are non-residential, community-based 501c3 nonprofits that advocate for making their communities and their states more accessible. So we have Centers for Independent Living, their satellites and branch offices, statewide independent living councils, and other organizations and individuals concerned with the independent living needs of people with disabilities living in rural America. So as a membership organization, providing training and technical assistance to our rural members is a critical component of the services we offer. Equally as important to us is ensuring that young people with disabilities are involved in all facets of program development and delivery. We are truly committed to the mantra, nothing about us without us. That goes for all areas of life, for young, for old. Our voice matters. We have to be involved. There's an old saying in DC that says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we suggest that everybody be at the table. The Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living believes that we should look at transportation, both public and private, from the traveler's perspective and give people the alternate community mobility options. So do people get where they need to go when they need to get there? Do they get there safely? And is it energy efficient? So what are our guiding principles? Anytime we talk about transportation, I look at it through this filter. All public transportation should be accessible to all users all the time. Systems designed to meet the transit needs of people with disabilities will meet the transit needs of all users. Accessible transportation means more than just having a vehicle available. It means people can actually use the transit service. Accessible transportation includes systems, services, vehicles, routes, stops, programs, and all other aspects of transportation, and must at least meet or exceed the minimum requirements set forth in the Americans with Disabilities Act. That reminds me of a quote from one of my good friends, Tim Sheehan, who is the executive director of the Center for Independent Living in Western Wisconsin. And Tim explained that one of the current issues is the lack of a common definition of transit throughout the transportation system. Rural transportation, where it is available, is generally defined as specialized transportation. So what does that mean? Well, when you don't define things consistently, this deficiency creates eligibility silos that in turn lead to competition for the limited amount of funding for individual programs. And then numerous restrictions are imposed on rural providers. Those include limited trip purposes, limited hours of service, client-only transportation, duplicative services, just to name a few. And also the cost of transportation in rural areas is generally higher due to the longer distances traveled. So what we want to look at quickly today is what are the funding sources for rural transportation? First of all, most transportation comes through the 5310 program. And the 5310 program, for those of you who may not be familiar, is the enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. Who is eligible for those programs? Well, it's for areas that are transportation is unavailable, it's insufficient, or inappropriate. Now, I can give you definitions of unavailable and insufficient, but I've yet to find anything that I found to be inappropriate. So we have advocated strongly on changing some of the language that's in the 5310 program that could help provide a more equal playing field for those of us out in rural America. Now, the 5310 program includes what used to be known as 5317, which was the New Freedom program. What the New Freedom program allowed was for being creative with your transportation dollars. Utilizing voucher programs were one of the things that was an eligible activity under the 5317 program. And I'll give some, more examples in just a few minutes. One of the other major funding sources for rural transportation is the 5311 program, and that is known as the Rural Transportation Section. This includes 5316 activities, tribal transit, and the Rural Transit Assistance Program. If you're not familiar with the Rural Transit Assistance Program, like the kids all say today, Google it and check those folks out, because there is some amazing information on their webpage. Now, 5316 activities. Those used to be called Job Access and Reverse Commute Dollars, or JARC, which have been utilized in a lot of different formats. And I give you this information because to find 5310 and 5311, normally you would find these funding streams on your state's Department of Transportation website. As an example, on the Arkansas Department of Transportation website, the 5310 program only talks about purchasing vehicles. I brought it up numerous times to them that we should include that language about the 5317 activities that were folded into that program. Thus far, I've come up empty-handed. They know those programs are still eligible under there, but sometimes it's easier to purchase rolling stock sometimes than it is to provide other types of transit options. So you've got the 5310, the 5311 programs that are your major funding streams for transit. Also, you have some Veterans Administration monies and also some non-emergency Medicaid transportation dollars that filter into providing transit opportunities for people living in rural America. So what are some of the successful strategies for rural transportation? Well, transportation services in rural area take planning, creativity, and ingenuity. Low population and long distances can make traditional fixed route and paratransit services too expensive or ineffective. So what do those examples look like? Well, strategies might include voucher programs. I know of at least 4 centers for independent living right off the top of my head that are operating voucher programs. And what these voucher programs allow to happen is an individual who needs a ride can contact whoever's providing the voucher program. In the cases I'm talking about are Centers for Independent Living. You would contact that center, talk about your transportation needs. They can issue you those vouchers, which can then be used in exchange to pay for rides. Those could be used to pay mileage to an individual, to a family member. They could be used if the host organization that is providing the vouchers has worked out a deal with a cab company. They can be used in lieu of cash payment for cab rides. What this does, in my opinion, is it allows the individual who is utilizing the voucher to have some say in what they're doing and to not feel the pressure that they're asking somebody to give them a ride, which a lot of times I know people in rural America who would rather be home and be sick and go without than to ask somebody to give them a ride. This allows them to pay for that ride and not feel that they're being a burden on someone. Other opportunities and strategies might be volunteers. A lot of these voucher programs need volunteer drivers. We look at flex services, meaning different time frames, taxi cabs. I know the folks out in Alaska have worked a deal out working with their cab company that they use some $53.10 to purchase accessible cabs. The cab company rides, and the Center for Independent Living helps ensure that they have folks riding those cabs through different types of payment systems, vouchers being one, that really makes an impact on the community of having folks be able to get from point A to point B. Mobility management. There's a lot of great things that come through mobility management. I could go on for days on that. Easterseals Project Action developed a great mobility management toolkit. We have coordinated services. Car ownership, which is always something that's going to be a reality in rural America, or a combination of these services. There's not a one-size-fits-all scenario for these. So here we are today, 47 years after the Urban Mass Transportation Assistance Act of 1970, and 27 years after the enactment of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Minimal or non-existent transit services in rural areas still create serious barriers to employment, accessible health care, and full participation in society for people with disabilities. I love this quote. This is from Dale Marsico, the director of CTAA from about 15 years ago, and America's most innovative, efficient, and flexible transportation providers are those serving rural areas. They are truly the transportation solution for the next century. Now again, my name is Billy Altom. I'm the Executive Director of April. You can reach me, probably the easiest way is via email at bwaltom@sbcglobal.net. I would be more than happy to entertain questions, provide you resources, introduce you to folks who are doing transportation in their communities. One of the things I love the most about independent living is the peer support mechanism of independent living, meaning that nobody knows what works better for a person with a disability than another person with a disability. I believe that transfers to almost any essence of life that we want to put it to. Folks who are providing transit services know how to do it, so they are more than happy to share with folks. Why recreate the wheel when there are opportunities out there? So feel free to contact me at any time with questions. As you could tell from the introduction earlier, we talk a lot of transportation, and I really went through this quickly, but I hope it gave you an idea of some of the types of services that are out there. So feel free to call me. Love to chat with you. And again, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.